Welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart Podcast. And my guest today is political commentator and entrepreneur Kirk Lubimov. Kirk, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mike. Glad to be here.
So Kirk, I followed you on Twitter for a while now. You put out a lot of great content on Canadian politics, on Canadian finances. So that's why I wanted to chat with you today. But if you could, maybe just give the audience a little bit of a brief background about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I focus a lot on policy and economics and the intersection of it. I primarily work in between helping entrepreneurs and policy makers find and investors the perfect combination of where they see the future is going. So I focus a lot on that, especially long-term views. In politics, we have this, especially in North America, this very short view, but we don't account for economic cycles. We don't account for technological changes. So I focus a lot on that aspect. And I try to bring a lot of it to Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. I know it's sometimes not too exciting, or it could be not as exciting as making fun of Trudeau's socks or something, but I think it's a high-level conversation. I think there's a lot of important issues that's happening, so I try to bring light to those topics.
Yeah, and just one comment on that too, and a lot of people, ramp on social media, and I do too sometimes as well. But there also, are ways where you can connect with other people, and you find this, great information on Twitter. And, I think that it's important just to note that because, you kind of said you kind of just popped up on Twitter, and now, a lot of, bigger accounts are following you for your, political comments, which is, definitely something that I think is noteworthy of saying. So, one of the things that I'm going to get into is one of your tweets that you said, and I know this was just recently, and I know people are still sort of following this and seeing how it's kind of unraveling and understanding what exactly it means. But you were talking about immigration. So you said, this will be the biggest immigration scam into Canada yet. Justin Trudeau's government will give foreign caregivers permanent residency on arrival to Canada. They reduce English skill requirements, and now all you need is some kind of high school education. So what exactly do you think is going to happen because of this new policy that's coming in? And can you expand on your tweet a little bit for me?
Yeah, it goes back to their continuous reckless immigration policy, right? We have, if we step back a little bit, there's this goal of bringing Canada to 100 million people. There's no reason except a political push by some ex-guys from McKinsey.
And sorry, Kirk, I just gonna pause just there, just for one moment. So the 100 million Canada, this is kind of news to me. Maybe it's something that I've missed. Maybe I've been too busy working. But please tell me just a moment about that, because I haven't heard about that before.
So it's called the Century Initiative, and there's a group of people. I think it's one of the people that's running it is one of a McKinsey guy, one of the consulting firms, and they're lobbying essentially or promoting for the government to push towards population growth of Canada to 100 million people.
By what date?
They call it the Century Initiative, so I would assume by 2100, but we will probably hit it a little before that if we continue with such a policy. Yeah,
and so. And just to kind of, get back to what you were talking about before, maybe just, before I had to pause you there about the immigration scam that you were talking about in your tweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess it's another policy addition that they're adding, right? They start with the student visas and then we have the temporary visas of temporary foreign workers visas, and now they're essentially adding to it, which is a caregiver visa. So they're changing it a little bit, and what they're reducing the English skills requirements to get into Canada, and they're reducing the education level needed. So you need an equivalent of a Canadian high school education, which however you measure that. And and all you need is essentially a resume that shows that you've worked in the field before as a caregiver, and that could mean a lot of things. And then you come here with a permanent residency. So it's essentially not only letting you into Canada without much parameters to control, but it also it's just letting people with low skill labor to come in here. So there is no way to control, right? So me and you can go, like, if we're in Philippines, whatever, Europe, anywhere, India, we can just put on our resume that, I worked as a caregiver. I changed diapers for my uncle or my aunt's kids for 10 years. And this is my experience. And boom, now you can get into Canada and save yourself years of trying to get in here with other ways.
That's crazy.
This would just open the floodgates. It's a reckless policy, but also we don't really need it. That's the issue, right? That's with a lot of other things. It's another bad policy that we shouldn't have to begin with.
And do you think, though, that this could open the door for like criminals to come in? Like criminals could easily just, apply for this and say, I did some caregiver work and possibly get in? Like, is that,
we're seeing, we're seeing the same abuse with the student visas. So I'm not sure how this will not, right? So a lot of issues, there's two steps into Canada, right? You get in here somehow with a student visa or with this new program or another program, and then you file for a family reunification, and then you bring in the rest of your family here, right? So all you need to do is just get one person through the door, right? And if you're, for example, if you're hiring a caregiver, a babysitter, whatever, for your business, you'll just hire probably one of your family members from back home, right? If you wanted people to come here. So you'll fake a resume. There's no education requirements except high school, right? So there's barely any English requirements. So you should think about it also that it closes your opportunity as an immigrant, right? So we're bringing people that are subpar educated and have subpar communication skills to work in a foreign country, which doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't set anyone else for success.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to, obtain a job in Canada, obviously, if you can't speak English, fairly proficiently, right? That's just, practicality of it, because, most people in Canada only speak English, only speak one language, or a lot of people do anyway.
Yeah, or have education, right? So, how many people do we need to change diapers? Or, how do you work with even just different people, elderly with different needs, if you don't have the proper education for it, right?
Yeah, it's not a policy that, I think is going to work out very well. So really glad that you brought it up, and thank you so much for explaining that. I really do appreciate that, Kirk. I want to move on to one of your other tweets too. And this actually is something that affects physicians, because a lot of physicians are incorporated in their medical practice. And so, a lot of physicians have been, very upset about some of the policies that are coming out. And so, you said that Canada's self-employment rate is at the lowest point it's been in decades. Justin Trudeau thinks that a large percentage of small businesses are tax shelters for rich people. And with this idiotic philosophy, we are seeing an increase in a capital gains tax, which is a tax on entrepreneurs' retirement that we don't need to begin with. There hasn't been a net gain in self-employment during the Trudeau Liberal tenure, and that's particularly alarming as we have seen consolidation of big companies over the years and a sharp rise in corporate bankruptcies. So you go on and expand a little bit more there, and definitely compare a little of the public sector jobs outpacing the private sector jobs. So again, that tweet, really caught my attention. I didn't realize that, entrepreneurship was, declining heavily, and has, the entire time since, Trudeau's been in power. And so why do you think this is so bad for Canadians? Why is it so important that small businesses are there to push the Canadian economy?
Yeah, I think, if you can pigeonhole one Trudeau government's, I would say, legacy, or so far their achievement, is their inability to generate self-employment growth and entrepreneurship in Canada. This is, it's essentially a crisis, because our jobs are mostly driven by small businesses and entrepreneurs, right? And so we have on two hands. One, we have mass immigration into Canada, and then we don't have enough businesses starting up or growing to take those jobs on, or give those new immigrants and new graduating Canadians jobs. So it's a bad situation. And then they bring this capital gains tax, which is, nothing more than a classism warfare or something, or more division. It's promoted as people need to pay their fair share, and somehow it will help young people buy a house, which makes absolutely no sense, right? So they're trying to spin one group of people against another using, just a money grab. So what actually happens here, a lot of people think that the same amount of people, it's the same group of people that are paying taxes, those capital gains taxes every year. They're like, oh, it's going to be the same billionaire family that's going to pay more and more taxes. I mean, there'll be a certain degree of the same people they'll pay every year on asset dispositions, but a lot of it will hit entrepreneurs that had successful exits or starting to exit assets for retirement. So imagine if we said, I actually wrote an article about it, but imagine if we said we're going to tax your RSPs, increase your taxes on RSPs or pensions by double digits. Everyone in Canada will absolutely lose their minds, right? If we're going to increase the taxes we're taking from your CPP, but now they're double digits. People will go absolutely insane, but they're doing the exact same thing, but just to entrepreneurs. And they're trying to market it as some kind of tax to rich thing. And I mean, yes, some people that have that kind of money are definitely better well off, but that's after decades and decades of paying taxes. That's after decades of providing jobs. It's after decades of education and especially for doctors. And just that's where their retirement is, right? A lot of doctors just don't have RSPs. A lot of politicians in Canada get 2 pensions. The mayor in Calgary, for example, gets 2 pensions, a supplementary pension, because one is not enough. But for some reason, we have to go and tax more to entrepreneurs to provide, to our economy and helping grow our economy instead of, just not recklessly spend. And the big part of it is it hits again on why would you invest in Canada, right? If you have higher taxes, it essentially reduces your ROIs, right? So you're coming in with so it increases Canada as a riskier tax jurisdiction, right? So if you're going to invest here, you're going to lose X amount of money more than somewhere else. So in other words, it increases your risk profile to invest here. So as an investor, you have now a couple options. Should you put your money at more risk or less risk, right?
So basically what you're saying is that if someone was going to invest, Canada would be a poor choice because our corporate taxes and other taxes are so high. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's becoming a worse choice, right? Between red tape and now new taxes. And it's so it's a double whammy, which is, some of the issues we see in Canada in general.
And you're right, though, too, about coming back to like the pensions and entrepreneurs. And, so, a lot of people who work in the, public sector, do have pensions, right?
Golden pensions. Yeah. Way better than anyone in the private sector. Yeah.
And, unfortunately, entrepreneurs don't have that. Like they have to build their own. And so, I do see what you're saying about how like they're being taxed, heavily right now. And like, if it was, the other way around, people would kind of be, up in arms about it. So, that's a very, very good point, I think, to point out. And I think that, I wonder how much consideration that was being taken into when these decisions were being made.
Yeah. And, we saw Norway try to trigger different taxes on the rich, France over the years, and they just led to mass exodus of investors and wealthy people. You're trying to go after the most liquid money out there possibly. Everyone is like, oh, we're going to tax, it's just the people with the cottages in Ontario that's going to get hit, or, some of the buzzwords making fun of people. But it's a very narrow outlook. It's a very short-term outlook. Because long-term, we need money invested in Canada, right? But some of the issues we're seeing in our economy is that the government is leading with the stimulus, with squandering taxpayer dollars into the economy rather than letting the private sector do it, which is what we need.
Understood. Yeah, I appreciate you explaining that tweet. That was very well done. One thing too I wanted to talk about today, and I've actually posted about this recently, and again, it's a very recent event, but we just found out that there was a man in Calgary who's using medicinal mushrooms or psilocybin for cluster headaches. And unfortunately, he couldn't get access to them, but he was being given access to MAiD. And for people who don't know what MAiD is, so it's medical assisted induced suicide. So, again, he was given access to MAiD, suicide, but wasn't given access to medicinal mushrooms, which is, completely ridiculous. And, it's unfortunate too. I don't want to go off too far because I want to stay on topic, but I'm sure you saw too yesterday that the FDA, or maybe it was yesterday that the FDA denied the approval of MDMA for PTSD. So that was kind of disappointing, but, I'm not sure what we need to do right now to get these, medicines available to people who, need them. But they certainly should be available, before MAiD. So, when you saw this story came out, what did you think about it? And, have you written any more about it since?
This is the perfect example of just a bloated, out of date, red tape healthcare system. So they went to court on this, right? And they spent, just think about it, what would it cost to approve someone just this, this compound that he needs out of magic mushrooms to live perfectly? Nothing, right? A couple dollars.
Yeah, maybe a couple dollars.
Yeah, like literally nothing. And instead, they went and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in court fighting him. Now, what is the purpose of that? It makes zero sense, right? It makes illogical sense. Like, nobody in the private sector would behave like that. But in the public sector, because it's not your money, there's all those middle managers and bloatness. It's like, okay, let's go fight him in court for nothing, like literally nothing. Like, just give the guy, let him order it, give it to him, and, let's rock with it. But instead, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in court fighting him. His situation is not any better. Taxpayers are out hundreds of thousands of dollars, and here we are. It's just another example. You probably know better than most people. In Canada, when we approve drugs, we're like 5 to 10 years behind the US. So, they approve things first, and then years later it comes here, and, we have to redo our own tests and all that stuff. And this is some of the, biggest issues that we have. Like, innovation in general changes much quicker than what, what the gatekeepers are, at the pace the gatekeepers are moving at. And we need to, and healthcare is one of those places where we need to get our, our shit together and, keep up with the times, essentially. There is absolutely no reason to fight anyone in court over a supplement that's, it could have been one and done and moved on. Like, there's, we should never focus on that again.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I didn't know about the wasting of the money. Actually, I had no idea that they wasted that much money in court. That's absolutely wild when, like you said, they could have just given this guy the medicine for literally, a couple dollars. If they needed someone to supervise them, maybe it's another $100 or for the person supervising them or something. Like, it wouldn't have been, a very big cost to it at all. So that's really disappointing to hear. And I'm, again, just kind of expressing my disappointment in general about the, still the red tape, in getting patients psychedelic medicines, because, I do think we have enough data out there now that shows that, these medicines can be helpful in certain situations, particularly when it's combined with psychotherapy. It's unfortunate that they're, not allowing people to use it for that. And then also too, for other conditions, like this guy here had cluster headaches, right?
Yeah.
And which is an incredibly difficult thing to treat. But a lot of people end up just going to the emergency room. They get, oxygen, just because it's again, incredibly difficult thing to treat.
And let's just put this in perspective. The same guy can just go into the streets in Calgary, especially in Vancouver, and just get fentanyl right? Like, with no issues, a hard, deadly drugs with no issues, no criminal charges, nothing. He can just carry it for his personal consumption. But something to improve his life, and it's like, no, we can't do this. We haven't shown enough studies for X, Y, and Z that's satisfying us. But it's like, I can just go get lethal drugs that the government provides on the streets. It makes no sense, right?
So with the fentanyl program, I should really know this. Like, can literally anybody just go up to a safe supply area and say like, hey, I need a safe supply of fentanyl and get it? Like, how does that actually?
Well, they're handing out a lot of drugs. The big issues in BC, especially right now, is that a lot of the drugs that are supposed to be shipped to safe supply locations somehow ends up in the streets. So in the last few months, and the last 6-8 months, RCMP has busted tens of thousands of pills that were designated to arrive at self-consumption sites, but they're ending up flooding the streets. And
so how does that happen?
That's my question too, is like, how does nobody raise the alarm, right? Like, if you order supplements, for example, or if you order whatever screws or whatever for your business, and tens of thousands of screws or whatever don't arrive, you'd be like, there is an issue, right? But somehow we have lethal drugs literally funded by taxpayers ended up on the streets, and it's like, I guess like nobody even says anything. I just don't get how that part even works.
Yeah, that's not logical at all. But just coming back to like being able to get access to it, do you know much about that process? Again, I feel like it's something I should know about, but like, do you have to have like an old opioid prescription, or like how does someone just get access to the medicine?
No, they essentially buy it illegally from the streets and can go and consume it there. Or there is, there's other ways. It's, especially on the BC, and it's starting to flood over into Alberta. It's, there is a lot of,
Right. But like, what I'm asking is like, could you go up to a safe supply center and get drugs? Or like, what are the requirements to actually obtain the drugs?
I'm not sure which drugs you can get directly from them, but you could get some, I suppose. Because one of the issues is, in it is that they trying to get you clean drugs, which is not laced with anything, right? So, and there was a guy in BC that was actually trying to sell those illegally out of a little, I don't know, a camper van, a little stand. He was trying to sell pure drugs, and I think he eventually overdosed himself. But there was a stint of someone trying to do that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if they still actually have to see a healthcare practitioner.
No, because a lot of those people don't, they start recreationally or end up with the wrong crowds. There's, I know in a lot of places in the US, you need like a note from Medicinal, weed or anything like that. We don't really have that same level for hard drugs in Canada.
Right. And have you seen it affect your area at all? I know you're in Calgary, right?
You definitely see it in downtown Calgary. There's needles and everything. I don't really go downtown anymore. There's nothing really attractive there. But you definitely see it, or used to see it as before downtown. And it's still a problem. It's, it's starting to spread more and more into Alberta from BC. And, you'll probably see it in smaller towns first, and then it will hit the bigger towns more. Edmonton, you definitely see the impact over there.
Interesting. Well, sorry to hear that, and hopefully we can clean things up. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, because I don't really see anyone moving this program out anytime soon, but hopefully things change. So let's talk about maybe the big announcement today. So I think some people were expecting this, maybe not for too long, but I think it was kind of expected maybe this week. But there was a rate cut in Canada, a 1/4 point. Before I get into your tweet on it, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I think they had so much pressure. It's hard to know if they're acting from a political pressure point of view or if they're seeing something fundamental in the Canadian economy from a CPI point of view that's giving them the confidence. This Bank of Canada has been erroneous in their assumptions so many times and to such a degree. It's I just hope at some point they'll, at least by sheer luck, they'll strike something correctly. But it's a big part of the CPI is essentially housing, right? A big part of our inflation is housing. So it's this 0.25 drop of a percent of a rate cut is essentially a safe, like, let's try to do something, but it's not going to do much rate cut, because the housing aspect of it, if it will trickle into housing, it will reduce the CPI anyways. The issue is like the other problems in the economy are so much greater than this rate cut is, that it's really not as important as what the government could do themselves to reduce the inflationary costs on Canadians.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting what you said there at the very beginning, though, too. Like you said, like, is this sort of a political move, or have they actually seen, data that shows like, hey, we have the ability now to cut rates, and this is going to be the right move, long term, short term, this is the right move for Canadians and for the economy, versus like, there's so much pressure on us right now. We just need to do something to show the Canadians that, like, give them some hope. And so what we'll do is, instead of, and not that they traditionally, do massive cuts, 0.25 is a traditional cut, but, they'll do a 0.25 cut, just to give us just a taste of something, a little bit of hope. And, like I said, for a lot of people, that's only going to reduce their mortgage by, $70, maybe $100 and $150 a month, which, is impactful for some people, but not really impactful for a lot of people, month to month. So I understand, where you're kind of going with that. Like, it's, it could be something that is, tangible. Like, maybe they did see something in the numbers that indicated we should do a cut, but it also could just be more of a political play, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a few sides to a rate cut. Right. So, they'll put pressure on our Canadian dollar, which will bring imports up. So it can drive up the cost of goods, for example, like food in our grocery stores. The other aspect of it we got to consider, the Liberal government is spending a record amount of money on essentially stimulating the economy. And if the Bank of Canada is seeing doing a rate cut, which is essentially a stimulus in itself. So they're seeing the economy is slowing down while we're still spending a record trying to stimulate it. So we have, quite a serious issue built in there. If we are still spending so much money into the economy, trying to, crank it up, get it going, give it some life support, and it's not growing, we have some serious fundamental issues that will come to light one day or another. There is no running away from fundamentals. It's essentially will bite you maybe 6 months down the road, maybe 5 years down the road. But, when the chickens will come to roost, that it's going to be a big one. So we need to really fix that issue underneath. And, the Liberal government can just stop mass immigrating people now, and it will do much more to our inflation and to improve our fundamentals than anything that the Bank of Canada can do. So we're just, they're essentially just trying to do what they can and, and kicking the can down the road.
Okay. So they're trying to do something to stop it, but essentially, even these rate cuts are not going to be enough compared to what's happening with the immigration, because the impact the immigration have is just too overwhelming for, a small rate cut to be, really impactful on the economy in the long term. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because, Canadians' biggest share of their hard cost is essentially their living expenses, right? So they have to live somewhere, rent or own. And this is where the biggest share of disposable income gets eaten out. And it's so we have a wave of tsunamis of renewals coming through from people that bought in 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, when the rates were dropping. And so those rates have started to come through. The issue is there is just nowhere else to live, right? So if you can't afford your house or your mortgage payment, so you have to go find a rental place, and you can't find a rental place, right? So a lot of people are getting stuck either in houses that they can't afford anymore to pay for, but they also don't have anywhere else to live, right? We just immigrating more people that we can house, and that's as simple as that. And I mean, a lot of people, I'm not sure they're considering it, but we just should be grateful that there's a lot of people in Brampton and a lot of Ontario that are okay with living 9-10 people to a house. Because if those people didn't, like, we'll have serious mass homelessness because we just don't have, the housing for all those people to begin with. And
so what do you think then is going to happen to housing prices?
The housing prices will have to come down at some point, right? So there is a couple of issues there. So if we look at some places in Ontario, some places in BC, like I think in May, last month, for example, in Vancouver, housing sales have dropped by 20%. But if you look at in Ontario, there's a lot of people already walking away from new builds, new condo builds. There's a lot of people who are already trying to dump their places that they bought a few years ago below what they paid for. So there's already a lot of unrealized losses and a lot of realized losses too, because what we're seeing is banks in their reportings, in the quarterly reportings, they're putting a lot of money aside for bad loans, essentially. And that amount of dollars is growing. So this rate cut may help banks. It may help the government of Canada when they renew their bonds, which there's, I think, about $400 billion this year, if I'm not mistaken. So in general, we'll pay a little less here and there, but the hard cost of Canadians is nowhere near to be, covered or lowered anytime soon. So the housing prices will have to come down because at some point we're just going to exhaust liquidity ability, right? There's just so much credit people can take on. There's so much money that people can access. And we're starting to see a lot of people that are living on credit cards, right? The Canadians in general are very indebted, and the hardest hit people are renters. Renters more than anyone in Canada have less liquidity. They live paycheck to paycheck. They use their credit cards more and more than homeowners. So, and the issue we're seeing now is you're putting this whole percent of population into more and more expensive housing, right? Even like the housing that's the Liberals are subsidizing to build, they're just essentially overpriced little shit boxes that we should never even be allowed to build, because it's, I mean, who the hell can grow in a 330 square foot, no bedroom condo, for $1,800 a month, like Chrystia Freeland there was boasting as a successful project for low to middle income Canadians in Victoria, which is essentially going to eat at least half of the income of the average Victorian there.
It's a poor quality of life.
It's a poor quality of life, right? And we adding more to it, so it's so something has to give, right? We're just exhausting the ability to keep accessing at some point just liquidity. So
I don't know if you are aware of WOA. I only became aware of them last year. They're a group of Canadians where they kind of predict, interest rates and predict housing forecasts and that kind of thing.
No, I haven't heard of them.
So they have a chart. Maybe I'll actually just have it up right now. So yeah, they have it at, it'll be 4.5% by the end of this year. Then 4% in the middle of 2025, 3.75% at the end of 2026, and then 3.5% in the middle of 2026. Do you see that happening, or do you think that those forecasts are kind of bogus?
Well, I definitely see 4.5 with this year. I mean, we're not that far. We're only one rate cut away from it. right? Just remember, the more rate cuts we need, it means the economy needs more stimulation and confidence, right? So if we continue to cut interest rates like this, it means we have something seriously, we have serious issues in the economy, right?
We need more stimulus.
We need more stimulus, right? And we need to create more confidence, which is for investors, which is a huge problem, right? So, we'll see a lot more pressure in our dollar valued against the USD, which is a big problem for Canadians. So the next government, or if it's the same government's going to be reelected, they really have to think of how they can stimulate the economy or keep the economy going without continue printing more money. Because our public debt service charges are essentially costing us more than a lot of services that we get for our taxes. So it's just money getting thrown away, and we need to start paying that down at some point. So there is no avoidable recession, but it just needs to rebalance what we're doing.
I largely agree with you. I just want to ask you one question too about the interest rates and the housing. So are you kind of predicting then a world where the interest rates are going to go down and the housing is also going to go potentially down at the same time? Because obviously, in the past, the opposite would be true. Lower interest rates, higher housing, higher interest rates, lower housing. But go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, interest rates will go down a little bit. I'm not sure how fast it will go down. It really, immigration is just such an inflationary policy. It's our most inflationary policy, right? It's our biggest inflationary policy that we have right now. It's as simple as that. We just mass immigrating more people that we can give them a place to be, and until that changes, we're not going to see any ripples through the housing to the same degree as we're seeing people just running out of credit. And this is essentially what we see. There's only so much there's so much someone is willing to pay for something, right? We're not immigrating billionaires, we're not immigrating millionaires, right? So you can only pool money within your family or use your equity to buy so many properties before that credit runs out. And then, right, I'm not going to pay $1.5 million for, a 2-bedroom condo. So, and the potential for someone to buy that, it keeps shrinking every single day. And this is what we're starting to see in the current real estate market is there's just no buyers there are willing or able to pay such high prices for current real estate.
Yeah, I've seen that too, that there's fewer buyers, but also too, they're just sort of predicting that in the future, there's going to be basically more owners and fewer renters. The same people who own, a lot of houses now may own more houses in the future. Do you think that disparity is coming, or do you think that's false?
There'll be some disparity, but it's more from a specific point of view. As I was saying before, they're renters. They just don't have the ability to save. And this is essentially one of our biggest problems besides mass immigration pressures into our real estate. To rent prices because of so much demand from immigration, Airbnb and all this, occupation of livable real estate is the disposable income of renters is depleting every single day. It's small and small every single day in general. So we're not building up a generation of people, or just in general any people that can save to own, right? Because you need to put X amount of dollars down. You need to be able to pay for insurance and all this. Owning a home is not always a profitable thing, but we just having a small population that's even able to save to move towards owning a home as a consideration. So this is one of the biggest issues there.
And then the other part of that too is that there's people now who you said, their renewals are coming up, or maybe, the renewals of the mortgages have already come up, or maybe they were in a situation where, they're in a variable rate where their, mortgage just kind of exploded. And then those people now, instead of being able to own homes, are trying to sell their home so they can just take some equity out and be able to go rent and live somewhere, and also to be able to get rid of this gigantic payment because of the interest rate. So, I think, that group of people has been, affected probably, the most to a certain degree. Have you seen that in some of the data that you've seen or that you've looked at?
Yeah. And, what we know is that everyone's payments essentially is going to go up, right? There's just no lower interest rates than what those people bought houses for in, 2021, 22. So we know every single, Canada, essentially 20% of Canada's real estate renewals come every single year, right? Because we renew it, in 5-year terms, right? So everyone's rates are going to go up. So there's, and what we're seeing is some people already can't sell their houses for what they bought for in Ontario. Like, we're seeing a lot of houses being listed below what they paid for originally. I think there's quite a few people that post about it just for fun, poking at real estate, on Twitter every day. So we see a lot of it already. So, but we're not even close to the peak of where we at. So this wave is just at the beginning of it. So what we're seeing what we'll see happen in real estate is just starting. We're just on the first, run up of the wave. So
I can see what you're saying there in some ways, because you said it's every 5 years. So, basically the people in 2019, would be renewing this year now. But then we have the onslaught of people who bought, I guess, in 2020, 2021, and then a little bit maybe in 2022. Their mortgages then will come up in 2026, 2027, 2028. Sorry if I got those numbers wrong. But, I can see like how your prediction could be true, because, the people who got the really, really good mortgages, their renewal dates still haven't come up. And I think that's why you're kind of predicting that we haven't seen the tsunami. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I actually posted about it before, like the breakdown by year of mortgage renewals. But yeah, next year in 2026 is going to be a big one. This year will, I think, if my memory serves me correct, is under, I think 13 or 14% of renewals are coming up. But next year in Valley in general, we're going to see a huge number. So we're just starting up kind of like middle of this year. And so again, but there is only let's just remember, let's take a step back. So in the last couple of years of this record on affordability, right? People were not saving for housing, right? They were depleting savings, except the upper middle class that had the benefits from the high interest and higher market returns. But there's a whole percent of population that's been depleting and adding debt just to survive, right? And that all eats up and builds up to less potential buyers, right? So, and this is essentially what we're seeing is there is less and less people they'll be able to afford to buy housing that were at their peak. And a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of new builds, a lot of areas are definitely below their peaks already. So there's already a number of people that are 10 to 20% below peak value of their houses. So when those houses come to renew, a lot of people have equity. And there'll be a huge portion of people that will say, should I pay, much higher mortgage in my renewal for a place that doesn't really have equity anymore? Or if we can't sell it, right? And, if you account for all the property taxes you paid over the years and all the different costs, there's a lot of people that haven't made any money on housing in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in where I am in London, it's just been basically stable for about 2 years. Like, it hasn't really budged. And I feel like now there's sort of like a I don't know for sure. I'm not in the market or anything like that, but I think that, it's almost like a stalemate. Like no one's really buying, no one's really selling kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a limbo. Housing is a product, right? And a lot of people have different emotional attachments to it, but at the end of the day, it's a product, right? So you need to be able to sell your product that someone that can afford to buy it, and that amount of people that can afford to buy it is just essentially shrinking, and that's all it really comes down to.
And again, that was a really good point, though. Like the amount of people who can afford to buy it is shrinking because they don't have much disposable income when they're renting. And so if they don't have much disposable income when they're renting, like how are they going to be able to save that money? Like they're, basically, like you said, living paycheck to paycheck where, can save very minimally, where it's going to take, decades to save up before they can even, afford a down payment. So, you couple in that you said with the, people who got mortgages in 2020, 2021, 2022 coming up in the next few years, it kind of seems like it's going to be, difficult for a lot of people to potentially own a home.
Yeah. And the other aspect of affordability that we haven't touched yet is we haven't accounted for a possibility if there will be a recession, right? So this is if we're chugging along to where we are now, right? But if there is a market correction, mass unemployment, or any amount of unemployment, Canada's unemployment is already growing. At some point during the next essentially 2-3 years, that will erode a lot of money out of the market as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And so is that the prediction that potentially, we could see a rise in unemployment?
Well, we're already seeing that, and it's essentially because we're immigrating more people than there's jobs for. So, what will those people do? At some point, this is, I think, one of the reasons why we also see crime and, black market activity really growing in Canada, because people have to do something to put food on the table, to pay for the housing, and all that. But I also, a lot of people may not understand this, or maybe even the politicians that may win the next election, but they essentially have to trigger an election to correct things. Trigger a recession to correct things. There's a lot of inefficiency in the market. There is a ton of bloat and, corruption in the public sector. We hear of a new scandal every single day. So they need to fire at least 10-20% of the people, right? They need to cut immigration to based on open doors to skilled labor with precision and attract investors, rather than, let's just get anyone in here with a high school diploma. So all those issues will have an economic shockwave on the short term, but it will fix things in the long term. So we need those hard decisions, and all of those will come with a ripple through the markets. So there is essentially, it's really hard to avoid it, and we just avoiding it is just essentially putting us in more debt and higher standard deviation of with more pain in the future. So it's better to rip off the bandage now and start fixing things rather than kicking the can down the road.
I agree. I think the worst thing that would be to cut interest rates hard, and then you get this massive stimulus, because then we could be in a worse cycle, even put ourselves in a worse position the next time. And if we don't go through at least one hard period, then we're going to be going through these cycles. And each time we go through these cycles, it seems like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and it's more difficult for people at the bottom to kind of climb to the top, so to speak. So
yeah, exactly. They don't print money to hand it out to the people at the bottom, right? So it's people that had their assets in risk over leverage that will get essentially a bailout, and banks, and same thing we saw with GM and all the other big companies. So we have to take very calculative steps with the next government, and they have to do it from day one. I just really hope they have the backbone to do so.
So there's a couple questions here that came from listeners as well that I just wanted to ask you, Kirk, if that was okay. I know we only have a few minutes left. If you can have a few minutes more after, that's great. But if you don't, no big deal. Will the base effects from 2023 versus 2024 mathematically increase inflation metrics in terms of rate of change? And if so, how does lowering rates, albeit incrementally, impact inflation and the economy at large?
Again, it depends on how fast they're going to move, right? It's it's a loaded question, but again, there's very little, right? So if we step back to some of the Bank of Canada comments about wage growth, about economic growth, and all this, and what they're seeing in real estate, and all three of them are essentially government actionable issues, right? We already talked about real estate. There's a lot of, from mass immigration that's impacting it. So there is the wage growth aspect of it. We got to look at it. Canada celebrates that we have 5% wage growth this month, 4% last month, blah, blah, blah. But if you take out the public sector union wage growths out of the calculations, they're actually not that much, right? So, and this is, I think, a big part that's not really being discussed about. So the stimulus that we're seeing from that aspect, right? And how this public sector wage growth happens by printing more money, right? And so this is like a double whammy here that we're seeing in the marketplace. So again, it goes back to what can the Bank of Canada do? And they can't, their cuts will not be as impactful as what the government can stop doing today. And this is what the biggest issues are.
I agree. Okay. Next question comes from another listener. Central banks have cleverly used both fiscal and monetary policies to revive economies while trying to control inflation and employment. Do you think this has worked? If not, what other tools can they use?
It's their, I guess in a way, it's their technical fundamental job if there was good governance within the government. In general, interest rates is all about stimulating the economy, right? So you drop interest rates, companies can borrow more money, they invest it, and then that investment hopefully generates employment. It's essentially very black and, a very low level, but that's essentially how it works. We're not seeing private sector investment. This is the issue, right? So even if the government, if the central bank drops rates, it doesn't mean that we're going to see more investments within Canada by Canadian companies. So, and one of the reasons for it is, one, we're not developing enough new companies. And that goes back to our talk about entrepreneurship and new taxes. And the other of it, we just have such limited amount of competition within the Canadian economy and so much red tape that's preventing people from coming here, that we just don't have a way for big companies to come here, or a reason for big companies to come here and invest big money, right? So, and this is what we need. So, and again, at the end of one of the tweets that you read, I said that we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that's because there is only so much that the Bank of Canada can do now, because the government is doing the exact opposite of it on the other side of it. And it's hurting us. What does
make a place attractive, though? Like, why are so many people going, say, to Austin, Texas right now? Is it because of the taxes there? Like, what is the reason why people are, investing in that particular place? And again, what would be the ideal place?
Yeah, the taxes there are totally different, right? The land ownership rights are totally different. And there's a government that's willing to work with companies, right? It's you can still do handshake deals there. It's a very easy to do. It's a very easy place to do tax, to do business and invest in, and there's a lot of reasons for it. They even talk about opening a new stock exchange in Texas right now. which to compete with the New York Stock Exchange, which would be absolutely epic. So we know that, and this is kind of actually a perfect example, right? Because we're thinking we can tax our way into growth in Canada and that the government can control. Where in Texas, it's a little bit the opposite, right? They have lower taxes, and the government just kind of gets out of the way as much as possible. And they're seeing influx of money and exodus from California and other places. So, we have plenty of examples to see what works, what doesn't around the world. And it's and this is the issue, is we really need to open up the Canadian economy and be competitive on the world scale. We have so much stuff that we can offer. Even this whole EV subsidies that the Liberals are obsessed with, over $40 billion in subsidies to build EV plants. It's like, okay, but let's do it with the closed loop supply chain management. Like, we have all the minerals, we can, foam up and make all the lithium batteries and everything. If we have the intent to do so, if we can move it, at the pace of business, but we can't. So as far as we're going right now is we're going to be build manufacturing plants to make China rich, which is absolutely so dumb, right? So
I always hear that building permits in Canada are atrocious to get when people are trying to building things. Like, that's one of their biggest obstacles. I imagine that's a big obstacle for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, if we look at big investments like CapEx investments, they take years to get money back, right? It's a very long-term horizon investment. So you have to really trust the jurisdiction you're investing in. And what we saw, for example, with the Keystone XL pipeline is like the perfect business case of why you should never invest in Canada. Unfortunately, we're red taped to our own, one of our most successful projects that could bring, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars into the economy. Instead of the private sector doing it for, 1/6 of the price, we did it for extra $30 billion and extra years. And, it's a perfect business case of how not to do business. Anyone that's involved in it, you can ask, knows how mismanaged it was. Just a red tape, they had to stop building a pipeline because there was a red hawk nest too close to it, and they had to adjust some things because there's frogs somewhere. It's just an insane thing. It's and every time you stop working, it's just costing money, right? So there is just no flow through, essentially, policy that we can sit. Okay, if I'm going to dig in today, what will it look like, in 2 years? Can I actually complete this in 2 years? Or there'll be a paper pusher, they'll be jumping on my job site every single month and, saying, hey, you can't stop here. There's a bee here. There's an ant hill over there. We just, from a CapEx and in getting our tech industry growing is essentially something we really need to focus on.
Well, it's just something that's unattractive, right? If you know that it's going to be easier to do business somewhere else, and why would you go and do a place where it's going to be more difficult to do business? So just have two more questions there for you, Kirk. So this one here, if our Canadian, this guy put it in peso, just kind of being funny. If our Canadian dollar gets devalued relative to other global economies that are coming out of recessions, i.e. they are stronger and they are expanding and buy our trees and dirty oil, how will that impact inflation?
Our dirty oil, I love it. It's we haven't entered our recession yet, right? So we're lagging behind some countries on it. Will it impact our inflation? Sorry, is that the question? Will it impact our inflation?
Yeah. Will that impact inflation? Or how will that impact inflation?
I don't think it'll impact inflation really that much because those are very narrow industries. And they're highly productive industries, right? We're talking about like our resource and oil and gas. So essentially our most productive industries in Canada are utilities and our resource industries. So there is nothing really there that will create hyperinflation or inflationary pressures within our economy to that of a degree, because those are industries that have so much efficiency built into them, right? So there is not a lot of extra things that they can expand on or spend. They'll create inflationary pressures on the overall economy. But I hope companies do. We need to be selling our resources. I mean, we have the golden goose here as a country.
Yeah, we do. We do have resources, and hopefully we can start using them properly, and generating some revenue from them. So, very last question. Very interested in your thoughts on Bitcoin. Are you a Bitcoiner, and what are your general thoughts on it?
I'm a big fan of cryptocurrency in general. I mean, not the issues with cryptocurrency news and stuff in general is because not all of it is the same, right? There's just shit coins, there's everything, right? There's scams, like, anything else. I'm not there's a lot of people who are Bitcoin fanatics, fundamentalists, right? It's Bitcoin or nothing, essentially. I'm not in that world because I like the technological offers that other aspect of the crypto industry offers. So, it's actually kind of funny that this question was brought up. I was walking in the mall and I had some USD in my pocket. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to quickly exchange it to Canadian dollars. So I'm like, I'll just walk over to TD Bank right here. That's, right next to the food court, essentially. And my goodness, it's like, it's still stuck into 1970s. The guy looked at me like I brought him like an alien. And it's like, I have to inspect those dollars. That it's always only like a pocket change. I think it was like $500. It wasn't that much. And it took like a good 15 minutes. You have to sign your name to something because the government can do something. Anyways, and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm just take the money, punch into exchange rate, just give me some money, right? Like, why does it take so long? And so I think the whole industry in general, from teller to how we transact, like the SWIFT system globally, is all obsolete. So one of the reasons I'm a big fan of crypto or Bitcoin as well, and other coins, is because you can transact faster and more efficiently than anything that's right now. The government can't print more of it, right? When you have people like Justin Trudeau says, I don't think about monetary policies, or he thinks that the budget will balance himself. It's good for you, but I don't want it to impact my my wealth, which is how the currency is structured, right? So inflation is essentially robs you of wealth, right? It devalues your assets in a way. It devalues the currency you're saving. So, and this is kind of, so far, is insulated from public policy. The other aspect of it is a huge part of the world is unbanked, right? They don't have a bank in their village. They don't have a bank in their, whatever, in their city, or they don't use it, or it's just, or it's like Venezuela or Argentina, whatever. It's just corrupt and inefficient, or you're in Africa, right? But as long as you have a phone and internet, with cryptocurrency, everyone can exchange value, and that is the biggest that is the biggest strength of it.
That is incredible. That, like, you can send money to someone, in like a rainforests, in South America,
and it costs you nothing. Right? You don't have to, you can be on your toilet in Timbuktu and send $5 to someone in Argentina, or, your uncle from Netherlands can send you some spending cash. You don't have to go to the bank. There's no SWIFT system involved. There's absolutely nothing. So it's the decentralized coins, the decentralized aspect of the technology is extremely powerful. And this is, so we're definitely moving to a new empowered field for personal finance, I think. And we're going to see a lot of regulators become obsolete, which is essentially they are already, which is why a lot of them are fighting the innovation of cryptocurrency and blockchain. And I'm a big bull on that area because it's we're still very early on in it. If you look at the grand scheme of things. So there'll be a lot of bad things, there'll be a lot of good things, but we're very, very early on in it still.
Cool. Well, like my childhood, like friend, like we're still like super good buddies, is a huge into Bitcoin. His name's John Ballas. I'm going to try and connect you guys. He's got a podcast too. I think you two guys would have a really good podcast, but we're just out of time there, Kirk. So, tell us about your Substack. Where can people find you on Twitter? What is your Twitter handle? And anything else you want to say?
Yeah, just I appreciate all the connections. It was a good conversation, Mike. It was a lot of fun. My Substack is under Kirk Lubimov, and so is my Twitter or X handle is the same thing, Kirk Lubimov. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Kirk. Well, thank you for coming on the show, brother. Be sure to follow him on Twitter, guys. Like I said, he's an amazing follow. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And as always, I'll be back again soon.